Third day, they're off at music, so it could be a little lighter today, but y'all surviving? That was not overwhelming. Okay, we're gonna do Thanksgiving. So, speaking, you have 40% off the for this semester. And if you're not, you can get money pretty much all paid this semester next week. Or anybody going to any rate or anything? I'm but okay. Go for marching band starting at 1:30. Last game for Sunday is 2 o'clock. And all the rest of one day you can hit all three of your two graphics on will constantly in one day. Any event is next Tuesday. Okay, so Friday is going for community. Saturday is call. Wednesday night, Dr. Thank you. Say it again, Jeremy. Okay. So Herbert and I will be in here at 7:30 on next Wednesday, and then percussion studio is on Thursday. The jazz concert is on Friday. The Lawrence is on Saturday. Y'all gonna be busy next week. Yeah. Hang in there. You can get if you go. You're not busy next week, so you can go watch everything. But the holiday comes through, the week after Thanksgiving, and then go to Thanksgiving week. I encourage you to remember that Thanksgiving is not an extended vacation. Okay, everybody ready? Yeah. Are you sure? Look how sleepy there. Okay. I'm gonna we need to hear more about, especially in music, and especially in music of different cultures, different origins, and understanding the pieces that we perform at say notes and rhythms level, and understanding what we're actually doing. So today I'm going to tell you about his own career, his background, and himself. But I'm so pleased to welcome Aaron and Taylor. Hello, how's everybody doing today? Yes, love the energy meetings. Good energy. What's your name? David. David. I'm going to match David's energy throughout this. If you'll wait while we do my grateful to be here. I own a consulting company called Equity Fitting. What we do is we help advise folks on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It started with exclusively music organizations, that's the name and everything. And then over the years, kind of grew and expanded. We provide a lot of support for all these different corporations, music organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, all these different types of organizations. Provide a lot of support for. That's what brings me here today. My career has been as a music teacher, 15 years as a music teacher. I still consider myself a music teacher, even though I'm not in the traditional thing. I spent the first part of my in the school district of Philadelphia, where I was teaching at a school called the Philadelphia High School for Girls. It's one of two public outdoor schools that was left in the United States. So it was a pretty old school. Its history is back in the 1800s and was really eye-opening for me to teach in that context and setting. And loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. It's the only school that I ever worked at, including colleges, that had a robust pop studio. So that school has 22 programs, and which is like crazy. So every year we did Benjamin Britten ceremonial carols, we did John Mayer carols because they're all completely all those sorts of things. And then we went on teaching in the school district of Philadelphia to the choir school of Delaware, where I am right now. The choir school of Delaware for the next week and a couple of days. Still being the executive director there, where I am the director of music and so, the choir, if you've seen Sister Act 2, we are what we. Uh, so what we do is we go out into the community, we bring students in to sing. We also provide mentoring, life skills, and a lot of social services supports to young students and their families. And so we serve ages 7 all the way through 18, and that's in Wilmington, Delaware. And so I would be so sad the privilege of a lifetime to be in a choir school organization, and equity student continues to and as I kind of continue to do more work in the university area, I'm going to really seeing those kiddos every single day. So that's a little bit about me and my background. And just, you can learn more about me in some, I'm sure. All right. In January 22, I was so excited. It was going to be like my first conference after the pandemic, first major pandemic. And it was for the American Film Directors Association. And I was asked to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And and this was for a music educators and children's choir program. The name was whether a teacher in school or performance. And I thought to myself, I'm just curious what Google would say if I just typed in music education. But don't qualify it, don't put anything on there, just 2 words, music and education. And so these are the things that came up when music education. I have music education in the United States, I have music education in the dad, just music and education. What are the things you want to come up with? Yeah. All white, yeah. What else do you miss? Mostly classical. Yeah, pretty much, I mean, except for really the guitar ensemble there, pretty much all. Yeah, so, yeah. What was the, yeah. One more time? Orchestra. Orchestra, ensemble, um, but, I'm not curious as you. Yeah, music and these were actually the first things that came up. What anyone great? I think these most of that. There were really no younger students that were in any of the photos. I would have expected to see younger students. I certainly would have expected to see maybe a teacher or teacher. So I think that this is really this is really telling because the perception of what civic education is and should be is easily revealed by others. Because people is our guidance. we put into Google these various searches, and it gets harder and harder and harder, or dumber and dumber, every single day, based on what we or Google need. And based on what we are Googling, this is our and I found it to be really interesting. It can be scary, but in this time where we're really aware of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all of these things, it seems that we need to evolve. And all these people are doing all these different initiatives and diversity, but they're really not effective. So what I like to talk about is the illusion of inclusion. And I'm going to show you this way. Does anyone remember seeing these maybe when you were in like, I don't know, second grade, third grade? Yeah. What is it? It's, it's an optical illusion. How does it work? Yeah, it's just sort of pixelated. It looks like it's spinning. Even though it looks like it's spinning, is it actually spinning? No, it's actually staying the same. And we have progress. And that's unfortunately what is education. We have done so many things to modernize music education, but it's still fundamentally the same as it was hundreds of years ago. What the only thing differently is we've introduced some technology, we've introduced some newer instruments, some new performance practice, ways to play. But really, music operates very much in the same way as it always has. When someone says, hey, I'm going to use, you know exactly what they mean by that. You don't ask them what kind of music they're going to learn. You already have an assumption that it's Western classical music. And I just think it's something that has for a long time just blown my mind. Like, you know, you have all these huge buildings, whatever, school of music. What kind of music? Except it's those things that we all know exactly what they mean. The illusion of inclusion, what I'm talking about is all the noise, all the ways we inclusion, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of kind of misinformation that is out there about diversity, and it's not actually moving forward what we need to do. So what I want to first start talking about is music education and music educators. Only pre-service music. We study to be music teachers, majority of you all here. How many of you are looking to be on performances or interested in the studio? Good. Now, if you're looking to do individual projects, studio work, if you are interested in doing community music ensembles, choir bands, etc., or you're interested in being pre-service or in service, can you raise your hand if you're doing some form of teaching when you leave here, whether it's in a classroom, in some community orchestra, bands, so the vast majority of folks are going to be done. So, what that indicates to me is that we've got to start thinking differently about the way that we prepare to be music teachers. And but I think everybody who teaches a should think of themselves as a music educator. If you think of yourself as even teaching in the one-on-one lesson domain, you're still teaching. If you see yourself as a professional conductor, you're still teaching. Right? You're still teaching technique, you're still teaching interpretation and everything. That said, I think it's really important that we understand teaching theory and teaching philosophy. What is the difference between teaching theory or teaching philosophy? Have you ever heard of teaching philosophy or teaching philosophy? Yeah. David? Yeah. It's essentially, right, essentially how you what you what bring to the table as an educator. Yeah, respect. Your philosophy of life is like, yeah, you know, right, you know, that's your thing. Right? That's your life philosophy. Your life teaching that's informed by the school experiences that you have in your part. And when you're teaching, using systems of learning. So that could be music learning theory, that could be that could be or that could be diagrams, it could be all these different things. Dookie, right? All of these are different theories or approaches, or methodology to teaching. But the ways in which theory is connected to our practice is sometimes misunderstood. Sometimes we just do the thing, but we don't think about why we do it, right? Just like we were talking about music school. When you go to music school, we don't question what kind of music. We already know. There's a basic understanding of what music school is, right? So what we need to do, all of us, is that we need to think intentionally about what is happening. So this is what this really great quote. Is the simple idea of our really things related to education. And they say theory is always present and can be separated from teaching. Right? And that's really, really important. And even if you're a parent, you are teaching. That's not for behavior, you might have kids one day, how do you think within your community? You're teaching you're teaching, you're the first one to teach, you're going to be all these things, right? Or if you're going to have nieces or nephews or anything like that, right? You're going to have some sort of teaching philosophy. So the study of teaching theory or teaching philosophy helps us to be intentional on what we actually do when we're in front of an ensemble, if we are teaching kids music, if we are leading a lecture with teaching, like let's say you're a professional musician in the Philadelphia Orchestra, you're still going to be taking responsibility when you're this stuff that was part of your contract. But what is your teaching philosophy? That is something that we should be thinking about. And the other thing you should be thinking about is what is the teaching philosophy between stuff? What you basically about music that has been important to you and that you mirror. And it's important that we realize that we mirror our teachers in many ways. I was doing a presentation a number of years ago with choir leaders and choir person and they had pretty much that. And I said, raise your hand if you program a piece of music that you did when you were in the K-12. Guess what percentage of the hand was? 100%. 100%. Right? And so we continually continue to not just move repertoire forward, but reproducing it, is that healthy? Yeah, yeah, it could be. It might not be. But it's like that photocopy. You know, you have that one good photocopy, then you copy it like 17 times, and it's all gray and fuzzy, and you don't actually know why we're doing it. So it's important that we take the time to think about that. So I took the university as a pre-service teacher, and I teach the very first sequence, which we don't always enter music ed, we call it assessment of music learning. And it's a really great class. And one of the things that we do is we studying music learning, but we talk about teaching philosophy. And one of the things that I would say is that a lot of people always do philosophy, always do this and do that, and that's cool, and that's totally legitimate, right? We all do that. There are very good teachers who are, I only teach this one way. I only believe like we are that human beings, we are a native creature, we change because of our environment, we change because of our lived experiences. But what we can say is that our worldview, I love this photo, is it's got the world that you can see the globe there within the moon. And so your worldview begins to create your teaching philosophy and your teaching theory. But the problem is, you won't put your eyes on every corner of you. And so it's always flawed, right? Like if we know that we can teach based on lived experience, that's great. But there's no way to see others see, hear every music that there is to hear, have every experience that there is to have. So now, does that mean that our philosophies are flawed? Perhaps, right? But it certainly suggests that we need to do something to make sure that our worldview is broken, so that we can be more inclusive in what we're doing. Then I'm going to go through a couple of myths about diversity and inclusion in this work that we're talking about today. Whether it's about music or diversity in general, these are all here, and they're over here. One is that diversity is power. And this happens all the time. So first start everything, you start a company and you basically take whatever clients you can get because you need to take clients because you're business and you need to make money, right? But now I that something that I have to do. And so whenever I see a client, a potential client reaching out and they're saying, hey, we've got this diversity problem, I'm like, let me recommend you to somebody. And the reason why I do that is because if you see diversity as a problem, then we are already not in the right mindset to be able to make change. That means if you're thinking we have this problem, we have a diversity problem, that means that you are already expressing that there is something that you are not doing. All right? So we have to look at diversity as an opportunity rather than a problem. Next, that diversity is in administrators. So here's that are looking to increase the diversity, not just racial ethnic diversity, but across a variety of different domains. And well, the dean's job, really it's admissions job, really it's always kind of stuff about it. I even hear in the public P to 12 sector, I also hear, oh, my principal, right? And I always tell teachers, particularly pre-service teachers, that you are the CEO of the classroom. You're the CEO of that classroom. And so you are responsible for making sure that there's representation in your class. Alright, so yes, they're going to impact what you're able to do and accomplish, but it doesn't mean that that it changes on them. You also have agency, you also have voice, you also have choice. Third, diversity is just about race and gender. Absolutely. Beyond race and gender, what other is diversity over there? Diversity of thought. Diversity of thought, well, culture, skill, economic stuff, religion, age, that's good. Well, place of origin, any other? Goals and perspectives. Yes, thoughts and perspectives. Any other kind of diversity? There's a little bit of a detour, but I think this is important. And I do have a graphic of it, but not in this presentation, so I'm going to just demonstrate my answer. So, in diversity, when we talk about it, we've got two wheels that we would look at. We've got like the big circle, and we've got a smaller circle. So, a bigger circle and a smaller circle. On the outside of this wheel, you would have things like education, socioeconomic status, religion. All of these things are on the outside that we have this projected. You see all of these things in a circle. In the middle of the circle, you have things like age, gender identity, country of origin, um, you have race, ethnicity. Does anyone see the difference between the I know David there. Anyone? But you're on the right track. Yes, in the back. Yeah. Yeah. These are. Okay, we're getting closer. Anyone get something to crack on? Go ahead. What's your name? Jason. That's it. It's next. So we say there are two words. We say mutable, say mutable, immutable, mutable, immutable, mutable, immutable. Got it? So the things in the middle of the circle are in the middle because they are important to who someone is and they cannot change that. Like no matter how hard you try, you cannot change who your parents are. I know you really want to, but you can't. They're always going to be them. No matter what happens, you cannot change your age. Even if you find the fountain of youth, you're just going to look good, right? It's not going to change how old you are, right? So they're immutable. You can't change those. Whereas on the outside, we've got these mutable ones, which means that they can at times be expressed if we want them to be or if we don't want them to be. So we might be someone who's highly educated, but we don't have to necessarily express that. Or it could be someone who is not highly educated, but then decide to make a change and become highly educated. These are not permanent state, they're transitive. Right? And so when we talk about diversity being just about race and gender, it's problematic in many ways because it limits the whole spectrum of diversity because we know that all of these different types of diversity intersect with one another at different points. We'll talk about that later. ADEI, that's an acronym for Access, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. There's a myth that this is about excluding people, that it is exclusive rather than inclusive. It's about kind of giving handouts to people, or it's about lowering the bar, or all of these things. That is not true. ADEI is also known as standard. A lot of times when I hear this from classroom teachers, this is one of the things that always brings me forward. Particularly in development work and looking at the team we see black and brown neighborhoods, in schools, they hear, oh my gosh, there's so much going on in their lives right now. You guys have to give me attention. Or there's so much, like they really need to be able to do this and it's to ensure that. Right? That's a learning standard. There's another term that we use for that in the kind of diversity industry. We call it benevolent bigotry. Right? And what that means is it comes from a good place. It really does come from a good place. You know, you're trying to be empathetic. But that is misdirected. And when we lower the standards for folks, what happens is they begin to believe that that bar is an instant destination. And so if we tell our students, if you tell your future student, oh yeah, here is the bar, but really, if you want them to get into college admissions, they need to be performing at this level, you have only set them up for failure in their future. What we should rather do instead is say, hey look, you might be performing here right now, here's the bar. And this year will be from here to here to here. And here's your plan to go from here to here, and your last year you can get to where you need to be. Right? That's all that equity is. Right. There are not enough there's a myth that there are not enough qualified teachers out there, particularly musicians, that we don't have enough musicians who music in different ways than Western music. It's not true at all. Many have not gone through the standard music certification system, but there are lots of famous musicians out there. Um, doing a research paper that taking a look at the critical examination, diversity in public education. And we have been talking about diversity in education since what came in 1954, early. Here's the 1954 was primary school. That's 1865 yeah, right, and then patient population. So 1865 is closer, any other guesses? 18, no, it'd be after 1865. 1871. 1871 is the very first publication of the by school. And it was talking about how to control diversity, that we have all of these folks performing and that we well, what do we do? So we have been talking about diversity for a long time. It is not a bad thing. It has always been here. Of course, there has been some collusion in the past. We are going to deal with it, and we have necessarily found the most effective ways to do so. But it is definitely not bad, and it is here to stay. And diversifying these two is not easy, that is a myth. Diversity, equity, and inclusion only benefit minorities or underrepresented people. That's the spirit. We all gain from diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly in music. There is no such thing as music without culture. There is no culture without diversity. It just cannot happen. It cannot happen. Music is a cultural tradition. It is spun from cultural tradition. Therefore, diversity is baked into what we do. And then finally, that ADEI planning, I always say this. And I was, oh, we should talk about some of that. But ADEI planning does not require having to pay consultants and lots of really smart academic people to make it happen. Anybody can do this. Anybody can do it in their classroom. Anyone can do it in their practice. You don't have to pay thousands of dollars unless you want to. Strategy. Right. Great. So, how do we diversity the past 180 years, right, in the United States? Well, there are really three approaches. There's a deficit approach that we can take, and in this deficit approach, basically what you're saying is, oh my gosh, the student came to me. They all, and you hear this a lot, they came in as a blank canvas. Have you ever heard that expression before? I, well, like, isn't that romantic? No one's a blank canvas. Everyone is inherently musical, right? We know that through research. And everyone has culture and domains of diversity. Therefore, we should not be looking at students at a deficit, right? And so when we approach diversity from deficit perspectives, we basically are saying, oh my God, we need to fill this in. We need to teach this because what's happening at home is not good. Like there's a bankruptcy at home. That what is happening at home isn't quite what we should be doing, or it's not the right way to do music. Then we have different space approaches. Different space approaches became really popular in the 1960s and in the 1970s. With difference-based approaches, essentially what we say is, well, everybody's different, and like it's wonderful that you do mariachi at home. That's wonderful. We love it. It's great. It's great. Though here in music school, mariachi isn't what you really want to do. But we love what you do at home. That's a different space approach, right? And so that was popular for a very, very, very long time. Even when I was growing up and in school in the 80s, but in the 80s, there was a campaign for tolerance. And tolerance was what we used to call it. And now, if we were to say, like, hey, you need to tolerate your neighbor, that would sound pretty messed up, right? But tolerance was, I remember guest speakers come into schools and talk about tolerance. And so that is from a different based approach. So we tolerate these differences, right, in diversity, but we aren't actually breaking them. And then we have what's different that-based approaches. I like to say based approaches because I feel like it's more honoring the human dignity of every person. And once that based approaches, that's where we are now. That's where we say, hey, the kind of reasoning that you did, it's really, and we want to stop it and then show you what else is out there in the world as well. But we're also going to study your kind of music too, or your cultural kind of traditional music, because we think that it's an asset, and we want you to be inspired. We think it's great, and we think it should be studied in school, right? So those are all different kinds of approaches. It's really only three, but it's really important that we know all three of these approaches. We're going to spend too much time on these, but this one here lives abilities. She basically was the first outcome of human the big education. But she really said, oh my God, education is super yeah, obviously, right? But that was revolutionary. But what she says is that the culturally relevant education is something that one is focused on academic stuff, is two, is culturally competent, that means students can good about themselves and the culture, and three, that there's a socio-political competence. This isn't talking about politics like Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Libertarian. What she means by socio-political competence is that we understand people, and we understand how people read in the world, and how people use their personal power and influence in the world, right? So very, very different. And so that was her theory of what she was to do. And then we have someone later, she's really Geneva Gay takes it a little bit further and says that, oh, it shouldn't be just relevant. It should also be responsive because not all of the students in your classroom are the same. And so what makes them tick is going to be a little bit different. Some so might like strawberry and somebody else might like flying. Who knows, right? But it should be responsive to what students are doing. So what she focuses on is teacher, and she says the teacher has abundant knowledge about diversity, right? She says that teachers need to have curriculum, that teachers need to demonstrate cultural caring and build learning communities in the curriculum. Like, and this is all into the social emotional wellness world that we're living in now, which are really post-pandemic. We are now dealing with this, our people. Um, and not just in the academic setting, but in general, to make sure people do well. Because people are not well. And that was a revolutionary idea. And then cultural communication. What Gay is saying here is that basically you can't talk to everybody the same way. And you can't expect them to talk to you the same way. And that if you want to talk to parents, if they're when you this course, I'm teaching ecology and similar and Poland with students that are please make sure you know the use for the teaching well. Read the letter. What I did no. What would I do? email with us. Very remind. As I was emailing like in the early mid 2010, 2012, but you know, emails people get a day. Now I use mine to hear, and the long I sort of care as much as the habit of writing and care of organization. Hi, everybody. Content Friday. Where your content black day. Monday. Don't forget content. It's on Friday. Tuesday. This is what a black uniform looks like, right? Wednesday. It's black suitors. Black suitors. All these little layers of content, all the information. And like Friday, it's like, right? And so effective way of communicating with parents in 2022, given this all the information and inundation of information that we have. That's what community is talking about, this cross-cultural communications, right? And that in different communities, where we racially, ethnically different, age difference, all these different community domains and communities that are diverse, have differences in how we communicate. And that is something that you have to learn and put a lot of invest time into learning that to make sure that you are ultimately successful. And finally, he talked about cultural root. And what she's talking about here is that a lot of times you say, oh, we love all our students, we want them all to be happy. But then, like, we don't do anything to actually back that up. Oh, we love diversity, but then, like, we don't do anything to foster diversity in the class. She also talked about this as a misalignment institutional body. Institutional body, right? So sometimes tells us a lot about what a person is thinking. So I'm are you doing today? I'm great. Is that person great? No, they're not good. Really just trying to not slap you. On the inside, the inner dialogue is doing. Right? So it's important that we're reading that institutional body language and allowing that institutional body language. So it's not that we're saying, yeah, we should always diversity, but if we don't use it as a domain or in these other things. And then finally, the most recent or way that the most major one is what we call culturally sustaining pedagogy by Paris and Lynn. They are amazing. If you ever get a chance to see them, they are incredibly dynamic characters and they are funny. I feel like they should speak in Canadian. But they basically said, yeah, yeah, students, yeah, we know there, yeah, we, can value diversity and inclusion, but they both learn, which means that guess what? You're not going to teach a student who has one dignity, everything from an equal dignity. So they might be Gen Z and American LGBTQIA community. And a Gen Z person who might be have a different perception of the way to engage in differently. Or a newly LGBTQIA person who is an octogenarian, 80 years plus, they different values. They might have different openness about the vibe to share with the colleague, with the employer. But it's important that we realize that we live in a culturally tolerant world. So yeah, I can live in the time and I can live in the right? These are usually exclusive. So it was revolutionary. Coloniality education. So what they hey, did you know there was this anti-colonialism? Hey, Did you know that people from Eastern Europe took over 84% of the world, which is astonishing. Western Europe is tiny, y'all. Western Europe is tiny. I lived abroad for a year in Italy, and say to these Italians who clearly okay, this because we have Sydney and Orlando and then and then down it's very large. It's impossible, right? But Western Europe is the only country controlled 84% of the vote. And how they did that was not just through military might, it was through education. It was through often basically free education. So like when history, right? And so because in history, they have the ability to re-educate in a way that folks don't necessarily even realize. Here's, and I'm going to talk about discoursive appropriateness. What they mean is, a lot of times we say, oh, we love, we love hearing gospel, or we love hearing, you know, music from Malaysia, but it's really not what we want to do, right? And so that's a discourse of appropriateness. All the kinds of discourse of appropriateness, like what is appropriate concert time, what is appropriate hair, what is appropriate nails, all these sorts of things are part of discourses of appropriateness. And then we have linguistic and cultural competence. That we need to make sure that our students can speak in a way and that is what we think hopefully valid for their community. So we focus on African American vernacular English, right? So Javon, and so I hear a class where, oh, I'm good, and the teacher goes, oh, never say, you know, hey. Whereas another week we could approach that by saying, hey, you're right, hey, don't do that. Of course, no one can do that. Sort of equally, not that one is better than right? Another thing is it's just like we can well we can affirm linguistic differences. Let's say if you're teaching in an elementary school classroom, there's like this song. It's like hello everybody, yes indeed, yes indeed, yes indeed. Hello everybody, yes indeed, yes indeed, my name. Right? We can change that up, right? We can say, um, shalom, everybody. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Shalom, everybody. Yes, indeed. Super easy. What's up, everybody? Yes, indeed. Hey, yes, indeed. Right? So there are so many different things that we can do to show people that there are different ways that we can say it. That's what they mean by linguistic and cultural competence. And then emergent historical practices, meaning we need to take a look at history and the future to be able to ultimately have excellent instruction. Right? So lots and lots of great information that they give us here. So theories matter ultimately. These kinds of theories matter that we just spoke about because they were necessarily poured into our teachers didn't necessarily teach in the culturally responsive way, but now we have the opportunity to do that, right? So we know that ultimately non-Eurocentric musical expressions, right, have been excluded. We know things that are in the canon. We know that musical practices that have stayed by the community. We know that the classical canon stemmed from music notation. And that music notation, those who read music are in the minority. The majority of music is not based on notational systems, right? People do, it blows my mind. So, let's get this fully tonal music example because it's studying on ethnomusicology, ethnomusicology. And we are sitting here doing this dictation, which I could barely do, and it was so advanced, and no one ever raised to this day. And to think that like we struggle with one tonality, and yet these other tones are singing in four or five different tones is absolutely stellar musicianship. And so we should be celebrating them and recognizing them. Okay? And so it's really, really important that we understand that all of this is important, particularly if you're in the classroom, because it's going to impact how you ultimately see your students in your classroom. All right? So what we've got to do is we always, when we move forward, we've got to look in the rearview mirror. Right? The rearview mirror is only this big. The windshield is this big. But if you're driving a car, you're not going to be that successful without having that rearview mirror. So it's important that we use it as a reference point so we know what is behind us so that we can do better. I'm going to show you a little quick video that sums up the history of music.
If you were born in Beethoven's time, you'd be lucky if you heard a symphony twice in your lifetime, whereas today it's as accessible as running water. We're drowning in music. We in the West have tended to have a misconception that history of music is a history of works or composers. This tends to reduce music into an object, into an exhibit in an imaginary museum. It also overvalues the role of the composer compared to most people who are innately musical. And I wanted to get away from the usual thing of which composer wrote what piece at what time to see the bigger picture. We're in a kind of moment of the global, of the universal. And music is absolutely universal. I'm Michael Spitzer. I'm Professor of Music at the University of Liverpool in the United Kingdom. I've written a book called The Musical Human, A History of Life on Earth. It's almost inconceivable to write a prehistory of music because Edison invents the phonograph in 1877, and prior to that we have no record of any sound. In terms of the evolution of instruments, the very oldest instrument we have is a human voice. We also have lithic instruments made of rock, such as stalactites, or the famous rock gongs in Tanzania. But the landmark is a discovery of bone flutes, flutes made out of the bones of vultures, and they're dated about 40,000 years, and they were found in the South German caves. One of the problems with instruments is that the materials biodegrade. So we have to work inferentially by mapping from what we do know. If you're looking at the broad picture of the evolution of sapiens, then the epochs are hunter-gatherer, farming community, and then the founding of cities and city-states. And each of these epochs is associated with mentalities. So hunter-gatherers tended to be nomadic, and if you're essentially journeying through a landscape, what you don't do is carry heavy instruments. Music has to be portable, ideally just a voice, or if not, a very light flute or a small percussive instrument. And if you look at the music that is played by the Cameroon Pygmies, every time they play a piece, it sounds different. It's very much music of the moment. Now, what changes when you invent farming? You settle down, and your whole mindset becomes fixed on the circle of the seasons, the circle of life. And you invent repeatable work, and the structure of the work becomes as cyclical as life itself. You invent the circle in music, you invent musical rituals. Once music migrates from the farm to the town, certain changes happen. Instruments can become heavy because you start to set quite permanent roots into the town. You create heavy instruments like bells and gongs, but also very delicate ones like harps and lutes, which will be damaged over a journey. And music's function now also changes with the growth of social hierarchy. The job of music is to be a handmaid, to serve the power of the prince or the church. Musicians become professionalized, and their job is to create music to be listened to for people with leisure. And this is the origin of what we call concerts. To have a concert requires leisure, requires money, and oftentimes it's the aristocrats or the upper middle class who had the time to sit back and enjoy music performed for them. For most people over millions of years, that doesn't happen. So the rule is that most music was performed functionally, as we say, whistle as you work. Also, it was performed in a participatory way, so there was no distinction between those who create the music and those who listen to it. It was the same people. The idea that we have a composer and we have a listener is a purely modern invention. 1,000 years ago, in 1020, an Italian monk called Guido invents staff notation, and life was never again the same for Western music. Why is that so important? Staff notation was a tool of church control, and through writing chants down, the church could ensure literally that monks singing at the furthest outpost of the empire of Christendom literally sang from the same hymn sheet. And then, once the empire expands beyond the Mediterranean basin, and Cortes invades Mexico in 1519, he takes notation with him. 10 years after Cortes decimates the Indians in 1519, by 1530, we have Aztec musicians singing Spanish polyphony in Mexico Cathedral. So music notation becomes the sharp end of the stick of globalization. Now, there are various consequences to staff notation. Many of them are frankly bad. By pinning notes down to a page, it's almost like capturing a butterfly. You're taking a note away from the voice, you're making it very precise. If you look at the way most people speak or sing, the pitch slides, it fluctuates, it doesn't stay still. Notation freezes a note, it becomes rather cold and mechanical. It also freezes music as an object, which is actually quite counterintuitive. Music isn't an object, it's an activity, it's a thing you do, like dancing or jogging. But once you turn it into an object, you create a division between the composer of the object and those who merely mechanically reproduce it. We're regaining the participatory condition of music, which was the norm thousands of years ago, where we all had an equal stake in creating and enjoying music. Greater integration with technology has served to accelerate a cultural change, and we see that in the extraordinary world of the internet. We can both create music in our homes and share it. The original bone flute was a piece of technology. It serves to extend human capacity. It extends the voice, which extends our imagination. I think it's fair to say that just as what Stockhausen or Beyonce is achieving today would have been completely out of the comprehension of a Mozart or a Beethoven a few centuries ago, we can't even begin to imagine the possibilities awaiting us in the future.
Get smarter, faster with videos from the world's biggest thinkers.
Think about it as like putting the is like thought. Thought about. Yeah, because I'm pro notation and I'm also pro inclusion. So not like the worst thing. One and then two. If you point, so I personally think music is a way to like free yourself, that itself, fraction five. Yeah, it really, a really great contextualization. Yeah. I think you guys, there's this idea that not still about, but know how we get awful stuff, and we have on it because we're humans. Yeah, I think that ultimately we are the homies we bring, where anybody can come and read. Everyone is good. Everybody can do it. All of these things that make it an experience, right? And then from there, it just becomes more and more and more exclusive, not intentionally so in these cases, but I mean, you got instruments, you got to have structure, you have to have all these things to be, successful musicians. What else stood out to you? Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you. Something you did, Victor? Right. And that's what's so hard, and it is that it's a vision of what's from someone's vision of what we think it should be. Like we really, every time, we have all this research into why, but really, that's a bad photocopy. We don't really know. It's just what has been reproduced over time. So as we begin to take a look at all these different things, we spoke about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We spoke about the mutable and immutable parts of ourselves. We spoke about culturally relevant pedagogy. We spoke about culturally responsive pedagogy and culturally sustaining pedagogy. We debunked some myths about inclusion, about what they ultimately can accomplish. And then we watched this video. The reason why I put the video afterward and not before is because it helps us to be able to sit with a bit of discomfort. Wow. And it allows us to sit, like when you hear that music has been used, what was it, as the handmaiden of power, like that's really uncomfortable, right? Particularly for me, I'm devoted my life to it, right? And I love, and I enjoy this music, and I want to do more of it. So how do we grapple with this art that is so beautiful, but can also be something that can put people in fire, can be something that's an extension of colonialism, all those things. And what I said is that by using culturally sustaining pedagogy, culturally relevant music, culturally responsive practices, we can also see the other things that are coming too, right? Because there is the enemy, right? And the other problem is that music has also been used for great social change. Like there literally would not be civil rights movement today, or ever. It wouldn't have been successful without music. We look at just how music is used all throughout the world in a form of active resistance. It's so important. It's so important for social change. So it's not that music in and of itself is bad, but when music is allowed to be an asset, then it becomes who is worthy of having that future. And so, what we need to do to make sure that graphic, that optical illusion, what we have to do is stop saying all of these other things, these kind of quick fixes, these band-aids, and really address the issue of the objectification of music. Who gets to participate? Who gets to help? Who gets to experience it? Because if we really take time to make sure that music is accessible to everyone, it's going to transcend race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, all those groups of things. If we think about music as a communal practice, that's going to change things. Even when there's an audience, there can still be a communal experience that's happening. How can we foster those when we are programming? How can we create those communities of practice? How can we sustain those communities of care in what we're doing? And so, what we do with you today is to think about when you go into your own classroom, you're teaching, when you go into your own job that are music related, thinking, what today? Make sure that music is not objectifying. What am I going to do today to make sure that music is going to be made accessible to at least one more person? Right? I don't know how many people are in this room right now. Maybe 100-ish. Imagine you all have careers of 30 years, musicking in the community, and every day you make music accessible to one person. That's all. That's all we need as people in this room. But it takes a daily commitment to do that. And it's a lot harder in practice than it is. But I am thinking about the one of the big impact is this. Impact is this. Impact is this. Now, I do want to say, I think we're just about at time. Right. So I do want to open it up to some questions. I am happy to hear how you're feeling. I will answer any question that you have. We'll establish this as a safe and brave space where we are not going. I mean, seriously, you can ask any question. I'm not going to judge any question that you might ask. Let's start with that. Yeah. why he did it wrong or why he skipped it recital because he will cry. He will go to their parents. They will go to their parents, and then the parents come to the third, the parents, you got one, second, third, warning, and you can get fired. And it's yeah, my question is how to keep discipline in this being like nice, not being offensive, and like
Yeah.
being so and deep that you get your point and it goes deep into there.
Thank you for that. And I want to say that a lot of what you're talking about is affirmed in the research literature. What you're talking about is of the concept of motivation. So, what I would say is to think more about it in the terms of motivation than discipline, because discipline can mean so many different things to different people, and much of it can have a negative connotation. But as far as what you're talking about is what is the motivation to be successful? The intrinsic motivation to want to do something, to want to practice, to be successful, to get it right, to stay up late to practice, and all of that. So I will first take a look at a reframing of motivation. And then when we take a look at the research literature that surrounds motivation, what we know is that in order to motivate people, they need to be held first and foremost to high standards. Just like we spoke before, if we show people models that are not excellent, they believe that is the norm. And so what I would say is how often do students see us as teachers being disciplined or motivated, right, every day to have routine? I go into classrooms so frequently and they don't have routine. But we can do so much to one, exhibit excellent musicianship, to show them model excellent musicianship, show them all those sorts of things. But then we also need to model a better way of just living our lives. How much time are we going to spend on this? Because, when, let's say, someone needs to spend 15 minutes a day practicing the piano, and they're just not going to do it, and they're not going to make progress, what I always say is, what else is going on? And is there anything that is regular? Where there's the motivation to have a kind of schedule of regularity. So I think it starts there. And so I think we begin to think about motivation. Motivation requires affirmation. Motivation requires modeling. And motivation also requires success attainment. So if students are not realizing that they are reaching, or people, it doesn't have to be students, it could be anybody of any age. If people don't feel like they are progressing, and that could be because we aren't affirming them, it could be because the chunks are too large. There are many reasons of why they might not feel successful. But if we can make people feel successful, we know that we can grow their motivation. Great. Let's go to David and then the back line. Yes. Like when we were getting bodies, I'm specifically Western musical tradition. Yeah. So when we start to talk about the large dominant cultural values, I think that can become a little bit more problematic. When there are socioanthropologists there who have done all these charts about what are the different values, do cultures value different things, and the truth is, if you were to go to the Catholic databases and you say multicultural or cross-cultural values, what the research literature shows is that they really do distill down into a couple of basic family, um, honesty, like big buckets. They might express in different ways. They might manifest in different ways, but there are these larger focal ones. What I'm thinking about specifically is what we evaluate as far as music goes, because I do believe that humans, when we are beginning, right, when humans are beginning, which right, we should do that. But when we are beginning, we share these, right? And so I think in musical communities, it is part of music, and I think
verb to describe the idea of music as but when we are communicating, then we are sharing values and we coming together for reasons only but otherwise. Right. Correct. Okay, so my question is, how do you get people inspired and, once we learn just like it is like I've met some people who have been like, oh, like, oh no, I'm saying it. And I feel like there's a lot of people saying, oh, that's I just couldn't do it. And the other is, I feel like with me, uh, you know, a lot of, especially at women, there's not as many people participating in like choir, community choir, church choirs, and so, you band, um, and how do you get more together? One thing is if anyone who course in big, there's two big groups. There's the American Cultural Association, which is more on the performance and then there's of course America, which is more administrative and advocacy. And there are actually more people singing community choirs in years than ever in the United States. So we actually see there are more people who are singing in community choirs, but there are drastically fewer people singing in church choirs and secondary school choirs and in television. And I believe that the reason for that, I mean, there's I feel that the fewer and fewer community experiences of singing. It does not matter if you're an instrumentalist or not. Everybody carries an instrument here. And that is really important to realize. Like back in the day, we used to get together and sing every morning when they were in school. People sang when they were in worship or temple or wherever they were. And because we weren't in those places that much, the more secular the world has become, the less singing that we have done, which is one, it's like great that there's more freedom of thought, but one of the sad things about that is favorite singing spaces where we and the other thing that is sad is that we no longer spend the day singing. That was like critical. If you were to go into any school from the late 1800s all the way through to the 1970s, everyone started with singing. And so I think that's something that we might be considering doing again. If we were to take a look at, and this is now really going to question people who feel like they don't have the ability, they've not had any singing experiences, and they probably, their musical age and their musical development is not matching their actual age and actual development. So if we were to take a look at Andy Gordon's music learning theory, it's really interesting right now, right? What he tells us is that we need to have heard a variety of tonal patterns while we are young, while we have our height of neuroplasticity, right? And so that means that we're able to make so many more connections between birth and age 5, is what he says, age 5. Oh, 5. Can we bump it up to 7 or 8? Yeah. But he's really talking about 0 to 5. And so because of thinking, because people are not hearing it, because people have been brought through similar experiences, I truly believe that has had a large scale impact on relationships throughout the community. It is not the same in every country. If you were to go to somewhere like Estonia, that is the same, right? Cars, and it's just huge, 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 huge. So it is an American thing as far as that goes. Yes. So you you use the word a lot, and I'm assuming that's something you studied with maybe Christopher Small's book Music Meaning. My question to you is, did music come first for you, or did the cultural responsibility come first? I will say that cultural responsibility is something that's slightly different than cultural responsivity. Cultural responsivity and cultural relevance are like, here are the ways that we are being inclusive. Cultural responsibility is just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it. So I want to just make the distinction between that. For me, I definitely started with culturally responsiveness. And then I didn't know that wasn't at the time. Like when I grew up in a very, mostly, it was actually an all black neighborhood, very low SES. And I was picked up into a conservatory program, and I was in that program from 7 to 18. And so I've spent basically the rest of my life, and this I'm speaking for me, I don't kind of speak for other people, but I spent my entire career trying to essentially recreate those experiences I had when I was a kid, because this program got it right. This program found a way to engage across cultural difference, right? And so I think that that's, for me, it was, wow, there was someone who saw me, someone who embraced, because, my music experience really started in the Black church, singing and playing all the time, but someone thought that was great. Someone saw me playing by ear and singing and thought that was great. And that is what began that motivation for me. Going back to the earlier piece, like there needs to be some sort of motivation, because there's affirmation, there's attainment, there's success attainment, so there was motivation. And then from there, I began to do more readings like the Smalls, and understanding that I was engaging in a community practice. And I think that I was experientially living that, but theoretically, I didn't understand that till later. Like, because all music, particularly the Black church, it only exists in a community context. There is no, like, even if you were to go to a Black church, like, you often will hear people, even singing a solo, this is not a performance. This is not a performance. Right? And that's like a common thing that you hear in the Black church, because it's a communal experience. So I think I just kind of experienced it, but I didn't really put the pieces together. But what kind of led me to that was responsibility. But in Matt's case as well, the vocal music editor is talking about music of Black diaspora. So you're that's what they were. What's the simple way to say that? Black is a very general term. It's music. There's so much there. You really, part two, we have to do about you can come to that at 4:30, it's an hour, and you can also ask me some more questions at that time. So, thank you so much.